For years, you've probably been told the same thing. Wake up earlier, be more disciplined, optimize your morning, and your life will finally start to improve. And maybe you even tried. You set alarms, forced yourself out of bed, followed routines that promised productivity and success. But even after all that effort, something still felt off. The results didn't match the discipline. The exhaustion remained, and deep down, there was a quiet frustration that no one seemed to explain. What if the problem was never the time you wake up, but the state in which you wake up? Because in Buddhist philosophy, the beginning of the day is not just a physical action, it is a mental and energetic opening. The first moments after you wake up are not neutral. They define the direction of your mind, your perception, and the way you will interact with everything that follows. And if those first moments are filled with urgency, anxiety, or unconscious habits, then no matter how early you wake up, you are already starting the day in scarcity. This is the invisible mistake of modern mornings. People wake up and immediately enter reaction mode. They check their phone, think about problems, remember responsibilities, and mentally rush into a day that hasn't even started yet. And without realizing it, they are conditioning their mind to operate from pressure instead of presence. Over time, this becomes their default state, and no amount of discipline can compensate for a mind that is constantly reacting instead of consciously directing itself. Ancient traditions understood something we have forgotten. The morning is not just the start of your schedule, it is the moment where your internal state is shaped. And that internal state determines how you perceive opportunities, how you make decisions, and how you respond to challenges. This is why two people can wake up at the same time, follow similar routines, and still experience completely different lives. One is present, intentional, and grounded. The other is rushed, distracted, and reactive. And the difference is not in what they do, it is in how they begin. This is where the ancestral habits come in. They are not about doing more. They are about shifting the way you enter the day. And once that shift happens, everything else begins to align naturally. Because you are no longer trying to force productivity from a state of tension, but allowing clarity to guide your actions. And when clarity leads, prosperity stops being something you chase. It becomes something you naturally move toward. If you look at how ancient traditions approach the beginning of the day, you start to notice something very different from modern routines. They were not obsessed with productivity, speed, or optimization. Instead, they focused on alignment. In Buddhist philosophy, the way you begin your day is not about how much you will do, but about the state of mind from which everything will emerge. And this changes everything. Because most people today are not living their days, they are reacting to them. They wake up already feeling behind, already thinking about what needs to be solved, already carrying a sense of pressure that hasn't even been created yet. This creates a mental environment where actions are driven by urgency instead of clarity. And over time, this becomes exhausting. The ancestral approach is much more subtle. It begins with the understanding that the mind, in the first moments after waking, is highly impressionable. It is not yet fully engaged with the external world, which means it is still flexible, still open, still capable of being directed consciously. And instead of immediately filling that space with noise, the ancient practices focused on shaping that moment with intention.
This is what we have lost. We have replaced presence with stimulation. Instead of allowing the mind to settle and orient itself, we interrupt it with information, notifications, and automatic thoughts.
And because of that, we lose the opportunity to guide our internal state before the world starts influencing it. In Buddhism, this is why awareness is placed before action. You do not begin the day by doing, you begin by observing. You notice your breath, your thoughts, your emotional state, and from that awareness, you gently guide your mind toward a more stable and intentional direction. This is not about forcing positivity or pretending everything is perfect. It is about creating space between you and your automatic reactions. And that space is where choice exists. Because when you are aware, you can decide how to respond instead of simply reacting. You can choose clarity instead of confusion, intention instead of impulse, calm instead of pressure. And when this becomes your starting point, your entire day begins to unfold differently. Opportunities become more visible, decisions become more precise, and even challenges feel less overwhelming because you are not approaching them from a scattered mind. This is why the ancestral habits are so powerful. They are not adding more to your morning. They are removing what is unnecessary so you can begin from a place of awareness. And once that becomes consistent, something deeper starts to happen. Your mornings stop being a race and start becoming a foundation. Before your body even moves, before your eyes open, before the world has a chance to enter your mind, something already happens every single day. Your first thought appears. And most people never question it. They assume it is random, automatic, just part of waking up. But in Buddhist philosophy, that first moment is one of the most influential points of your entire day. Because the mind, in that exact state, is still soft, still unguarded, still highly receptive. It has not yet been filled with external noise, which means whatever arises in that moment tends to shape everything that follows. And for most people, what arises is not intentional. It is worry, pressure, memory of problems, anticipation of stress. Without realizing it, they begin the day already in a state of lack. This is where the first ancestral habit creates a profound shift. Instead of allowing the first thought to be unconscious, you gently replace it with something deliberate. Before opening your eyes, you pause, take a breath, and bring your attention to something specific from the previous day that you can genuinely feel grateful for. Not something abstract or forced, but something real, even if it seems small or insignificant. The importance is not in the size of what you are grateful for, but in the direction it gives to your mind. Because when you begin the day from gratitude, you are not denying your problems, you are simply choosing where your attention will rest first. And attention, in Buddhist thought, is what shapes perception. What you focus on expands, not because reality changes instantly, but because your mind begins to organize itself around that focus. Over time, this creates a subtle but powerful effect. Instead of waking up feeling like life is something you need to survive, you begin to feel that there is already something present, something working, something supporting you. And this changes the emotional tone of your day before anything external even happens. This is why the habit may seem simple, but it is not superficial. You are not just thinking positive thoughts. You are training your mind to recognize what is already there instead of immediately searching for what is missing. And when this becomes consistent, your brain starts to look for more of what you acknowledged, which naturally shifts your perception of opportunities, interactions, and even challenges. What once felt heavy begins to feel manageable. What once felt empty begins to reveal small forms of abundance that were always there but never noticed. And all of this begins in a moment that most people waste without even realizing it. After the first thought of the day is consciously directed, the next interaction you have is not with the world, but with your own body. And yet this moment is usually treated as something mechanical, something rushed, something done without any awareness. You drink water while thinking about everything else, already distracted, already mentally ahead of yourself. But in ancestral traditions, this simple act was never considered trivial. In Buddhist understanding, every action carries intention, and intention shapes experience. This means that even something as basic as drinking water can either reinforce unconscious living or become part of a deeper alignment between mind and body. The difference is not in the action itself, but in the presence you bring to it. When you wake up and drink your first glass of water with awareness, you are doing more than hydrating your body. You are creating a moment where your attention returns to the present, where your mind slows down enough to actually feel what is happening instead of rushing through it. And this may seem small, but it directly interrupts the pattern of starting the day in distraction. The ancestral approach transforms this into a quiet ritual. Instead of drinking quickly, you slow down and take a few intentional sips, allowing yourself to feel the water, to notice the sensation, and to mentally associate that act with something meaningful. You might think about cleansing, about clarity, about renewal, not as abstract concepts, but as something you are actively initiating in your own system. And what this does over time is subtle but powerful. It teaches your mind that not everything needs to be rushed, that the day does not have to begin in urgency, that even simple actions can be done with awareness, and that awareness itself changes the quality of your experience. In Buddhist philosophy, presence is what transforms ordinary moments into conscious living. And when your day begins with even one or two actions done with full attention, it creates a ripple effect. You become slightly more aware, slightly more grounded, slightly less reactive. This is how change actually happens. Not through dramatic shifts, but through small interruptions of unconscious patterns that accumulate over time. And by bringing intention to something as simple as drinking water, you begin to re-establish a connection between your mind and your actions. Instead of moving automatically, you begin to move deliberately. And that alone starts to change the rhythm of your entire day. At this point, you have already done something most people never do. You have interrupted the automatic start of your day, directed your first thought, and brought awareness into your first action. But there is still something deeper that needs to be addressed, something that cannot be fixed by action alone, because it sits underneath everything you do: the constant mental noise.
Most people live in a state of continuous internal movement. Even when they are physically still, their mind is running, planning, worrying, replaying conversations, anticipating problems. And over time, this becomes so normal that they no longer recognize it as a problem. It simply feels like life. In Buddhist philosophy, this state is often described as a restless mind, a mind that is never truly present, always moving between past and future, rarely anchored in what is actually happening. And when the mind operates like this, it keeps the body in a subtle state of tension, as if something always needs to be solved, even when nothing is happening. This is why the third habit is not about doing more, but about stopping completely, even if only for a short moment. The idea of 1 minute of real silence may sound insignificant, but when practiced correctly, it becomes one of the most challenging and revealing parts of your morning. Because the instruction is not to meditate,
Not to control your breathing, not to visualize anything, but simply to be still and do nothing. And this is where most people struggle. The moment you stop, the mind becomes louder. Thoughts appear more clearly, distractions become more noticeable, and there is an immediate urge to move, to check something, to escape that stillness. But this reaction is not failure, it is awareness. It is the first time you are actually noticing what has always been there. As you remain in that silence, even for a short time, something begins to shift. Your nervous system starts to settle. The urgency that was present a few moments ago begins to lose intensity. And for a brief moment, you experience what it feels like to exist without reacting, without chasing the next thought, without being pulled in multiple directions. This is what it means to step out of survival mode. Because when your mind is constantly active, it keeps you in a state of reaction, as if every moment requires immediate attention. But when you introduce stillness, even briefly, you create space. And in that space, your mind becomes clearer, your perception becomes sharper, and your actions become more intentional. Over time, this 1 minute begins to extend beyond itself. You carry that calm into the next part of your day. You react less impulsively. You notice more. You feel less overwhelmed by things that previously would have triggered stress. And slowly, your default state begins to shift from constant urgency to quiet awareness. This is why something so small can have such a deep impact. Because you are not just pausing your day, you are resetting the way your mind operates within it. After creating space in your mind through silence, something important becomes possible for the first time in the day. You can choose your direction before the world starts choosing it for you. And this is where the fourth habit enters, not as another task, but as a way of giving your day a clear internal orientation. Most people don't live with intention, even if they think they do. They wake up and react to whatever appears first: emails, messages, problems, demands. And even when they have goals, those goals are usually external, focused on what needs to be completed rather than how they want to exist while doing it. As a result, their energy becomes scattered, constantly shifting depending on circumstances. In Buddhist philosophy, intention is everything. Not in the sense of wishful thinking, but as a conscious alignment of your inner state with your actions. What matters is not only what you do, but from which state you are doing it. And if that state is unclear, unstable, or reactive, then even productive actions can feel heavy and disconnected. This is why declaring a single intention for the day is so powerful. Instead of creating a long list of goals or tasks, you choose one word or one quality that will guide how you move through the day. It could be something like clarity, patience, focus, calm, or even strength. The specific word matters less than the connection you create with it. When you say it out loud, slowly and consciously, you are not just speaking. You are reinforcing a direction inside your mind. You are telling yourself, before anything else happens, "This is how I choose to experience today." And that changes the way you respond to everything that follows. Challenges don't disappear, but your reaction to them becomes more stable. Distractions still exist, but you notice them faster and return to your intention more easily. Interactions with others feel different because you are not just reacting emotionally, you are responding from a chosen state. Over time, this creates a form of internal consistency that most people never develop. Instead of being shaped by the day, you begin to shape the way you move within it. And this does not require effort in the traditional sense. It requires awareness and repetition. The more you practice choosing your intention, the more natural it becomes, until eventually it is no longer something you remember to do. It is simply how you live. In Buddhist terms, this is the transition from unconscious reaction to conscious action. And once that shift begins, your energy is no longer scattered across everything that happens. It becomes directed, stable, and aligned with what truly matters. At this point in your morning, something fundamental has already shifted. You are no longer waking up in reaction, no longer rushing into the day with a scattered mind, and no longer moving without direction. But there is still one pattern that silently shapes most people's relationship with life, and especially with money. The constant feeling of needing to receive before giving. Most people leave their house already in a state of expectation. They expect the day to go well. They expect people to treat them a certain way. They expect opportunities, money, recognition. And while this may seem natural, it creates a subtle dependency on external outcomes. Your mood, your motivation, and even your sense of worth begin to depend on what you get. In Buddhist philosophy, this attachment to receiving creates imbalance, because when your energy is focused only on what you lack or what you hope to gain, you reinforce a perception of scarcity. Even if you have enough, the mind continues to operate from a place of not yet, always waiting, always seeking, never fully present with what already exists. This is why the fifth habit introduces a quiet but powerful reversal. Before you begin your day, before you enter the world expecting anything, you intentionally give something. And what you give does not need to be material or significant in a conventional sense. It can be your attention, your kindness, your time, your presence, or even a simple gesture of genuine appreciation. What matters is the direction of your energy.
When you give first, you are no longer entering the day as someone who needs something to feel complete. You are entering as someone who already has something to offer. And this subtle shift changes the way you interact with everything that follows. You become less reactive, less dependent on outcomes, and more grounded in your own state. Over time, this creates a different relationship with abundance. Instead of seeing life as something you need to extract from, you begin to see it as something you participate in. And when you participate from a place of contribution, rather than expectation, opportunities start to feel more natural, interactions become more genuine, and even financial growth begins to align differently. This is not about giving in order to receive something back immediately. It is about breaking the internal pattern of scarcity. Because once your mind stops operating from "I need" and starts operating from "I can give," something opens. Your perception expands, your interactions change, and your sense of control over your own life becomes stronger. And from that place, receiving is no longer something you chase. It becomes something that flows naturally. By the time you reach this final habit, something subtle has already changed in the way you move through your mornings. You are no longer starting your day in distraction, urgency, or unconscious reaction. There is space, there is awareness, and there is direction. But there is still one final layer that shapes how you experience life as a whole. And that is the way you imagine what you have and what you believe is missing. Most people think they understand visualization, but what they are actually doing is reinforcing scarcity. They imagine a future where they finally have more money, a better life, more comfort, more freedom. And while this may feel motivating, it quietly sends a message to the mind that everything important exists somewhere else, in another time,
in another version of life that has not yet arrived. In Buddhist philosophy, this creates a subtle form of suffering, because the mind becomes conditioned to live in "not yet." No matter what you achieve, there is always something else missing, something else to reach, something else to complete. And as a result, even progress feels incomplete, because your perception is always oriented toward what is absent, rather than what is already present. This is why the ancestral approach to visualization is fundamentally different. Instead of imagining a distant future, you bring your attention to your current life, exactly as it is, and you begin to experience it through a different lens. You mentally walk through your day as it already exists, your home, your work, your routine, but you intentionally shift the emotional tone with which you experience it. You begin to see what is already supporting you. You recognize what is already functioning. You allow yourself to feel that, even if your life is not perfect, there is something here that can be experienced as enough. And this is not about pretending or denying your goals. It is about removing the constant feeling of lack that blocks your ability to see clearly. Because when your mind is focused only on what is missing, it becomes blind to opportunities that already exist within your current reality. But when you begin to experience your life from a place of presence and sufficiency, your perception expands. You start to notice possibilities that were always there, but were hidden behind the idea that nothing was enough yet. This shift is what changes everything. Because from that moment on, you are no longer chasing abundance as something external. You are cultivating a state that allows you to recognize and create it. And when your perception changes at that level, your actions naturally follow. You make better decisions. You move with more clarity, and you engage with your life in a way that is no longer driven by desperation, but by awareness. This is what the ancestral habits were always pointing to. Not a formula for success, not a rigid routine, but a way of waking up that transforms how you see, how you act, and how you relate to everything around you. And once that changes, prosperity is no longer something distant. It becomes something that begins within you.